It started innocently enough, a therapeutic relationship that blossomed from adolescence into adulthood. For years, your therapist had been a trusted confidant, helping you navigate through family divorce, teenage heartbreak, college decisions, and the general tumultuous journey of growing up. You'd grown close over the years, perhaps too close, sharing intimate details about your life, your dreams, your fears. He felt like a friend you could always confide in. But now, at 23, settled into your postgraduate job, things began to feel different, wrong. The questions he asked during sessions started to cross boundaries you didn't even know existed. Sure, you'd always been close, but these were questions that felt invasive beyond professional necessity. When he asked about intimate fantasies involving your workplace, something inside you recoiled. The specificity of it felt calculated, predatory. You lied, saying no, but the truth was more complicated. Months ago, you'd written a short romance novel involving a coworker and uploaded it anonymously online. It was harmless fiction, and besides, that person had since been promoted to a different department. But how could your therapist know about such specific details of your work life? The questions multiplied. He wanted vivid details about your dreams, probing for imagery you weren't even sure you could remember. He asked about your product choices, your daily routines, your personal preferences. The way he asked made it seem like there was more than clinical interest behind his inquiries. Then came the chance encounters. First at Macy's, where you found him browsing the women's section. He claimed he was buying a birthday gift for his mother-in-law, but something felt off. After that meeting, he specifically asked about the perfume you'd been shopping for, as if he were conducting market research on your personal choices. The encounters became frequent and eerily coincidental. The park, coffee shops, even a yoga class once. Each time he had a plausible explanation, but the pattern was becoming undeniable. You were being followed, stalked by the one person who was supposed to be your safe space. During one particularly emotional session about a recent breakup, he let something slip. He mentioned understanding how hard it was to lose contact with someone overnight after spending so much time with them, relating it to his own divorce experience. But wait, hadn't he told you at Macy's that he was buying something for his mother-in-law? His wife had been divorced from him long before you even started therapy. That's why your parents had chosen him specifically to help with their own divorce issues. The realization hit like ice water. He had been lying, manipulating, watching. Your paranoia transformed into strategy. You decided to test your suspicions systematically. At the end of your next session, you casually mentioned your plans for the coming days, specifically that you needed to refill medications he had prescribed. You knew he knew exactly which pharmacy you used. 2 days later, you drove to the pharmacy but didn't go in immediately. Instead, you waited in the parking lot, pretending to search through your purse. Within minutes, his familiar car pulled into the lot. He parked several rows away but didn't get out. Instead, he retrieved a notebook and began writing furiously, documenting your every movement. You entered the store, glancing back to confirm your suspicions. He remained in his car, scribbling notes like a private investigator. When you emerged with your prescription, he was gone. But the violation felt complete. This wasn't therapy, this was surveillance. Your next test was more elaborate. You had mentioned to him that you planned to visit your recent ex to smooth things over. You had no intention of reconciling, but you needed to give your stalker a reason to follow you. You called your ex Seth and asked him to close the curtains downstairs when you arrived, explaining you'd tell him why later. From Seth's upstairs bathroom window, you spotted your therapist sitting in a different car you'd never seen before, parked strategically where he could observe the house. He was writing frantically in that same notebook, his obsession now undeniable. But the nightmare deepened when you looked out another window and saw a second unfamiliar car positioned down the street in the opposite direction. Inside sat a woman you recognized from a photograph on your therapist's desk, his ex-wife. She too was taking notes, participating in this twisted surveillance operation. The scope of the stalking became horrifyingly clear. This wasn't just one unhinged individual, it was a coordinated effort. Both your therapist and his ex-wife were documenting your life, your movements, your relationships. The line between therapy and violation had completely dissolved. You borrowed a hoodie from Seth to make it appear you were reconciling, then carefully orchestrated your departure to test their response. Sure enough, the ex-wife followed you home, parking outside your house and continuing her documentation. You managed to crawl close enough to her car to photograph her notes, and what you saw shook you to your core. The paranoia that had been building for weeks was justified. Every move had been calculated, every encounter planned. Your trust had been weaponized against you by the very person meant to heal your psychological wounds. The therapist who had helped you through your parents' divorce, teenage heartbreak, and college anxiety had become your most intimate predatory. The psychological toll was devastating. Every friendship felt compromised. Every public space felt unsafe. Your own sanctuary, your home, your mind, your private thoughts had been violated by someone who held the keys to your deepest vulnerabilities. The questions remained haunting. How long had this been going on? What else did he know? And most terrifyingly, what were his ultimate intentions? Your mental health support system had become your greatest threat, turning therapy sessions into intelligence-gathering operations and your personal growth into fuel for obsession. The person who was supposed to help you heal had instead become the source of your deepest trauma. Deep in the valleys of Montana, surrounded by towering mountains with yellow stones sprawling in the distance, your 60-acre property had always been a sanctuary. Wildlife was common here. Elk, moose, coyotes, wolves, and bears were regular visitors to your back porch. As someone studying to become a veterinarian who bred snakes as a hobby, you had a deep connection with all creatures. Animals were everything to you. The nightmare began 6 days ago on a winding mountain road. You discovered a black bear cub that had been struck by a vehicle, still alive but clearly dying. Your bleeding heart for animals compelled you to stop, despite knowing the dangers. You called wildlife authorities, but they were 3 hours away. The cub was suffering, paralyzed from the waist down, its head flopping helplessly. As you knelt beside the dying creature, checking for any sign of life, you heard it. The unmistakable huffing of an adult bear. Looking up, you found yourself face to face with the largest black bear you'd ever seen, so massive it could have been mistaken for a grizzly. She stood 10 feet away on the other side of the guardrail, her eyes fixed on you with an intensity that froze your blood. This was no ordinary bear. She was pitch black with a distinctive white star and stripe on her forehead, and her eyes shone with an unnatural bright blue that seemed to pierce through your soul. In your panic, you scrambled for your truck, accidentally discharging your rifle and putting a hole in your own roof. The bear rammed into your door, tearing off the driver's side mirror as you sped away at nearly 90 miles per hour down the treacherous mountain road. But the horror was just beginning. After driving 3 miles at breakneck speed, you looked in your rearview mirror and gasped. The bear was barreling down the road after you. Bears cannot sustain full speed for 3 miles. It was physically impossible. Yet there she was, relentlessly pursuing you. For 5 days now, she has circled your house like a vengeful spirit. She sniffs at every door, digs at your back fence, and maintains a constant oppressive presence. You've had to bring your giant African tortoise inside, and your dogs are losing their minds while your cats spend all night at the windows, hissing and yowling at this supernatural threat. The most disturbing aspect isn't just her presence, it's how she's affected the entire ecosystem around you. Your neighbor's 6 horses were found dead in a locked barn, their throats ripped out, with no evidence of forced entry or struggle. They had simply stood there and waited to be slaughtered. Another neighbor reported all 20 of his cattle dead, not eaten, just killed and left to rot in the fields. The calves were found a mile away, alive but traumatized. The entire town has mobilized, 50 people with guns patrolling ranch perimeters. Grizzly tracks are everywhere, but you know the truth. This isn't a grizzly. This creature defies natural law. Your own animals have turned against you in ways that defy explanation. You have over 30 animals, each one known by name, each with its own personality. These creatures have been with you for years, some since they hatched or were born. But now they all seem terrified of you. Your rats, who normally climb their cage walls to greet you, cower in corners. Your most docile snake, Lucy, whom you've had for 8 years and who has never bitten anyone, now attacks you repeatedly. Your cats flee when you enter rooms. Your dogs view you with suspicion and fear. And even your tarantulas fling their irritating hairs at you. The psychological assault intensifies with whispers inside your head, a woman's voice you can't quite understand, like listening underwater, but the tone is hauntingly sweet, reminiscent of your mother's lullabies. You feel like a siren is calling you, and you know it's her, that bear circling your house like a shark, hunting you with supernatural persistence. You've tried everything to defend yourself. Rubber bullets and rock salt had no effect. You finally resorted to your AR-15, a gun you hate but keep because your grandfather gave it to you. When you fired, the bear's head exploded in slow motion, flesh and blood spattering the sagebrush behind her. For a moment, you thought it was over. But then you heard the familiar growling. Turning back, you watched in horror as she stumbled upright, her head grotesquely damaged but somehow reforming. You blinked and she was whole again, blood still surrounding her but completely uninjured. You emptied your entire rifle into her, then used a shotgun, then made Molotov cocktails and watched her burn. Each time, she got back up, unharmed and increasingly menacing. You've tried to photograph her, but your phone screen goes white every time you focus on her, as if she exists beyond the spectrum of normal reality. Whatever she is, supernatural being, goddess, ghost, or something else entirely, she doesn't belong in this world. Now, you've barricaded yourself in the utility room of your basement, surrounded with weapons and makeshift explosives. You've put out enough food and water for all your animals to last a week. The whispers in your head grow louder, making it difficult to think clearly. Her call becomes more insistent, more seductive, promising love while threatening destruction. You didn't kill her cub, you were trying to help. But she doesn't seem to care about truth or justice. She wants you, and she's made it clear that she won't stop until she has you. The line between natural and supernatural has completely dissolved, leaving you trapped in a nightmare where a mother's grief has turned into something far more terrifying than any earthly predator. The primal terror grows with every passing hour, knowing that she's out there, waiting, circling, an unstoppable force of vengeance that defies all natural law. As a freelance photographer drifting from city to city, you'd become accustomed to budget accommodations, but the hotel you checked into in Los Angeles was something else entirely. Its neon sign buzzed like an insect trapped in amber, casting sickly light over a peeling facade that whispered of secrets better left buried. The location on the edge of downtown fit your budget, but everything about the place felt wrong from the moment you stepped inside. The clerk at the front desk barely acknowledged your presence, his voice flat and rehearsed as he slid the key across the counter. Room 512, elevators around the corner. His indifference was more unsettling than outright hostility would have been. Other guests in the lobby seemed to glance up at you in unison before quickly averting their eyes, as if they knew something you didn't. The elevator ride defied explanation. You remembered pressing the button for the 5th floor, but then there was a gap in memory, a lost moment in time. When awareness returned, the doors were already sliding open onto your floor. Your hands felt clammy, and you had no idea how much time had passed. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, with faded carpet creating murky patterns under dim lighting that seemed to pulse with its own malevolent rhythm. Your room door resisted your key just enough to make you doubt whether you belonged there. Inside, the space was sparse. One bed, a desk, a tiny bathroom, and curtains drawn across a window overlooking a narrow alley. It should have been comfortless but safe, yet as you set down your backpack, you felt the distinct sensation that someone had just vacated the room moments before your arrival. The wrongness began immediately. When you left to get a soda from the vending machine and returned 20 minutes later, your bag was unzipped despite your certainty that you'd closed it. Your journal sat open on the desk, pages splayed as if someone had been reading your most private thoughts. Housekeeping seemed impossible given the short time frame, but no other explanation made sense. The walls carried sounds strangely, creaks and soft shuffles echoing as if footsteps passed just beyond your door. Each noise made your skin crawl with the certainty that you were being watched. Sleep became elusive as a thought pressed itself against your consciousness. Someone was observing your every move, someone who already knew far too much about you. Morning brought no relief. The light filtering through the curtains had a gray, diluted quality, as though the sun itself was reluctant to shine on this place. Down in the lobby, the same clerk manned the desk with mechanical precision. When you asked about someone entering your room, his response was practiced and dismissive. Housekeeping doesn't service rooms after 9. Maybe you forgot what you left where. Your attempts at photography that day felt futile. Even surrounded by hundreds of strangers on the busy Los Angeles streets, you could identify figures that seemed to pause just long enough to study you before melting back into anonymity. The sensation of being watched never left, following you like a shadow even in broad daylight. Returning to the hotel that afternoon, you lingered in the elevator lobby, staring at the cracked mirror on the back wall. The elevator seemed to skip floors. You pressed 5 but never felt it stop at 4. Your reflection appeared delayed, as if it took a beat longer to move when you tilted your head. Back in your room, the violation had escalated. Your camera sat on the desk, powered on, displaying photographs you hadn't taken. Images of yourself sleeping, brushing your hair, staring out the window. Intimate moments captured by an unseen observer. The violation was complete and terrifying. Confronting the clerk again yielded only a slight shift in his expression, a tightness around his mouth, perhaps pity or fear. "If you don't feel safe," he said, "you can check out, no refunds." But something about the hotel held you, as if leaving would mean never knowing the truth that gnawed at the edges of your consciousness. That night, you forced yourself to stay awake, propped against the headboard with your journal and pen, documenting every creak and sigh. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m. Despite your determination, exhaustion won, and you drifted off. A crash jolted you awake. The desk chair had tipped over, your camera lying beside it. The screen glowed with another unauthorized photograph, this time showing not just you, but a pale figure standing in the doorway behind your sleeping form. Too tall, too still, with eyes like dark smudges of ink. Your belongings had been rearranged again. Your backpack leaned against the window, with straps tied in knots you hadn't made. Your notebook lay open to a sentence scrawled across the page in handwriting that wasn't yours. "Stay out of the elevator." The ink was still wet. Curiosity wrestled with terror as the elevator groaned down the hall, doors opening with a metallic shudder, though no one stepped out. Inside, words were scratched into the metal panel. "They're watching." Whatever was happening in this hotel transcended your imagination. Someone or something was stalking your every step with supernatural precision. The next morning brought another confrontation with the clerk, whose facade finally cracked slightly. "You don't want those answers," he said, almost kindly. "No one ever does." A maid passing by muttered under her breath, "Don't follow the voices," her face blank as a wax figure. Testing your theory, you placed your ear against the wall and caught fragments of whispers. "Stay, stay with us." The words weren't threatening, but pleading, which somehow made them more terrifying. Exploration of the hotel revealed dark secrets. Past a certain point on the 5th floor, the bulbs were dead, plunging corridors into gloom. Signs reading "out of order" or "no access" couldn't hide the rusted, useless locks. Inside these abandoned rooms, you found evidence of interrupted lives. A single chair with the faint outline of recent occupation, abandoned suitcases with faded name tags of people who had checked in, but perhaps never checked out. A faded photograph waited on your bed that evening, a frightened young woman standing before the same elevator you'd been riding, her body positioned as if trying to escape. On the back, in shaky handwriting, "She never did." The realization struck hard. You weren't the first to walk this path of terror. Sleep brought fresh horror, as scratching sounds awoke you to find new words in your notebook. "Go below." The basement beckoned like a mouth waiting to swallow you whole. Following maintenance doors and descending rust-stained stairwells, you discovered corridors lined with steel doors. Behind one hung open, you found a room crammed with